Well, in February of 2020, we did a series at church called Screen Time that was all about our phones and how to navigate the digital age. And I'm just curious, does anybody still get their Screen Time notifications on Sunday mornings? Is that not the most convicting thing you've ever Mine's been sending me these, I look down, it's like not even real. It's like, there's no way I was actually on it that much, And so I thought maybe we could just start the conversation this morning by just maybe pass the mic around and we could just go around and all share how much we've been on. Oh, you don't want to do that? You don't want to? Okay. So what's amazing to me, and I'll see if you think this is funny as I thought it was. In February of 2020, we did a series called Screen Time. And then on March 31st of 2020, this was the headline in the New York Times. Coronavirus ended the screen time debate. Screens won. I love that whole series for absolutely nothing, apparently. But they're right. And in fact, I want to show you a bit of a comparison here. I mean, it was cool. It was a good series. You can go back and listen to it. But this first picture I want to show you is 1998. This is a famous shot, Michael Jordan versus the Utah Jazz, crushing the hearts of Stockton and Malone, which, side note, I lost in trivia recently to a team called Stockton Malone. Two guys, a white guy and a black guy. And if you don't get why that's hilarious, phone a sports friend, but it's true. But what I want you to notice is all of these fans in real time just focusing on the second greatest basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, in this moment, all right, crushing the hearts of the Utah. This guy's a heretic. I'm never coming back to Athens Church. Now, this was 1998, okay? So fast forward to this season, go to the next picture. This is LeBron James setting, you can show it, that's showing the all-time point scoring record. And I want you to notice every person in the room capturing the greatest basketball player of all time, LeBron James, setting the all-time point scoring record. I hate this church, I'm never coming back. But just look at the fans. Look at the difference through which we experience the world all these years later. I was going for a run recently through campus at UGA, and they have all these signs up all over campus that say, heads up dogs. And what those signs do not mean is heads up because, you're about to make it through finals, so keep your head up and you're going to make it. What they're saying is heads up or you're going to get run over by a bus. If you don't stop, and we're going to get sued, but it's going to be your fault. So that's just the world that we live in. In fact, we experience the world through screens. We are in many ways surrounded by them. In fact, one of my favorite places on earth is New York City. I was in New York City earlier this year or late last year. And I'll tell you what, I love New York, but I don't love Times Square. Times Square is just overwhelming to me. There's just so much going on. People trying to sell you stuff and half naked people, and that was just our group, But then just, and there's just all the advertisements and all the screens, and I'm walking through Times Square, and I'm like, this is just overwhelming. It would be awful to live in that all the time. And then I looked down at my phone, and it dawned on me, I do. That overwhelming, kind of oversaturated, get me out of here feeling that many of us feel when we walk through Times Square is now in our pockets all the time and in front of our face, distracting us, stressing us out, draining us. So much so that I really believe that if Jesus were here doing a 2023 Sermon on the Mount, that all of us would be here like this, doing the whole thing the whole time, going, can you do another one of those miracles? Again, enough with the conviction, back to the miracles. We'd be doing this. And I really believe he would say, look, we've got to talk about that thing that's kind of getting in between us. So a couple disclaimers for this morning. Number one, as far as we know, Jesus did not have any sermons about technology or the iPhone, okay? He didn't have like the 10 commandments of Tinder. He reaches down and swipes left in the sand and everybody walks away guilty. He didn't do that one, right? I don't believe that the locusts in the Old Testament were actually angry birds. That's not what we're saying, all right? I mean, Moses did come down with a couple tablets, but they didn't say what kind. We don't know the brand of the tablets or whatever. So I'm not going to make the Bible say anything, try to make the Bible say anything. It's not saying this morning, okay? And disclaimer number two is this. I'm not judging you. This is a judgment-free zone. And in a lot of ways, it has to be because nobody in Athens owns more screens than Athens Church. Hello. So, I'm in the room with you right now, but you're not even looking at me. You're looking at one of our amazing screens, right? And you ever thought about that? And if this talk goes well today, I'm going to be on my screen, hopefully more than any of you are on your screen. So this is not, phones are bad and you're bad and we're going to burn all of our phones and our secular music CDs while we're at it. What's a CD? I know. We'll give you some history lessons, right? That's not what this is. So what are we actually talking about? Well, if we had mean, we could talk about this for a semester, honestly. If we had more time, I would love to talk about how you're not even really the customer in all this, but you're actually the product, right? In fact, if I could give everyone homework, everyone homework, it would be to leave here today, go home tonight and watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix. The amazing documentary called The Social Dilemma. And one of my favorite quotes from that documentary says, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. We could talk about that. If we had more time, we could talk about how the promise of the internet was to bring everybody together, but how according to a lot of research, it may actually be the most segregated place that we have. That it doesn't foster diversity, it actually fosters division and pushes kind of people into more and more extremism. We could talk about how politics fit into all this. I mean, you don't get online to look, get into politics, right? You get online to look at family photos and, pictures of puppies, basically. That's why you get online. But why is it that you can't seem to escape all the political noise, right? Why is it that about 75% of all political posts are done by 6% of users, right? That's interesting. We could get into that. We could talk about AI. I mean, many of us are convinced that AI is the worst thing in the world, right? I am convinced the worst thing in the world is when you're in a group chat and somebody with an Android gets added in. That's what I really want to talk about today. That's the real problem. That's the real reason why we're here. And it sounds like you agree with me on that. But look, the screen time debate is over. Screens won. We're not trying to go back in time here today. What I want to do, and what we want to do in this series, is try to make sure that we are living well in the hybrid world that we live in now, and try to figure out how we realistically can come up for air when we need it. Does that make sense? And I'll tell you, nobody needs this talk more than I do. That's why I asked if I could give it, okay? So the reality is we have become pretty attached to our phones. Like literally, like I saw a stat recently that said 75% of Americans can reach their phones without moving their feet 24 hours a day. And I just have so many questions about that. Now, I asked if I could share this, but a couple weeks ago, my wife's phone fell out of her kind of cross-body bag into the toilet. And she had to go without it for a couple days, and she loves her phone. And as soon as it happened, the first thing I thought of was Stephen's message from a couple weeks ago that he makes me lie down in green pastures. Like, I'm not saying that God knocked her phone in the toilet, but he didn't catch it either, I guess is what I'm saying. So sleeping on the couch tonight. Hello. So we bring our phones with us all the time. A study of recent 19-year-olds asked a group of 19-year-olds, which would you rather have, a broken phone screen or a broken finger? Which one do you think they picked? Yeah, because you still got 9 good fingers. I mean? Like there's a lot you can sort of do with that. I mean, over half of all Gen Zers, we said this recently or the other week, over half of all Gen Zers would self-report that they spend at least 10 hours a day on their phones. The irony of an app called TikTok, it's in the name. They tried to tell you, right? It's going to take up all your time. Now, millennials, we are not absolved from this either. In fact, more times than I would like to admit, I have been like Paul Rudd's character in that movie, This Is 40, hiding out in the bathroom playing, Scrabble on the iPad, just trying to get a break, right? This is why they say scrolling is the new smoking. Everybody knows how nice it is to get out of a meeting and just get a good scroll in every once in a while, right? Not necessarily good for you, but it is there for you. In fact, back in that Screen Time series, I brought this quote from Ronald Rollheiser. He said, technology is the new gluttony. Technology is the new gluttony. It's the buffet that we can't seem to back away from. Now, if you're like me, I grew up, I love buffets. My big two were Ryan's and Golden Corral. And I want to be very clear, I'm not going to say one bad thing about them. In fact, we're open to sponsorship. So if you work for Golden Corral, holler at us. But as a kid, I used to love walking into Golden Corral. I would practically skip into Golden Corral. Happy birthday to me, And if that's you, you are my people. But I'm walking into Golden Corral as a kid going, this is such a good idea. And by the time you're done, right? By the time you're done just stuffing your body with all that stuff, you're like, this was such a bad idea. Well, technology is the new gluttony, right? That therein kind of lies the dilemma. I'm gonna always remember a college girl told me one time, she said, I love my phone, but I hate my phone. And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, well, I love what my phone does for me, but I kind of hate what it's doing to me, right? Why is that? Why is it that you sit down, for an hour to kind of clear your mind, honestly, shut your mind off, catch up on some stuff, you finally put the kids to bed, you want to just, you finally finish your project or whatever, and you just scroll for a little bit, but at the end of an hour, you feel worse at the end. Why is that? Well, none of this was on accident, of course. In fact, Sean Parker was one of the original creators of Facebook. He's played by Justin Timberlake in the movie. And he has now kind of done a 180 on the way he feels about social media. In fact, he would even say regrets some of that. And this is a quote from a recent interview in a magazine. We'll put it on the screens for you. He said, God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. The thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, and he built it, right, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while. We'll come back to that. Because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you more likes and comments. It's a social validation feedback loop. Exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Welcome to the burnout society. Now, the vulnerability that he's talking about, he mentions in the article, has to do with dopamine. And what any tech programmer would know, or any psychologist would know, would be that pain and pleasure and pain are located in the same part of your brain. And your brain has a goal, and that's to stay at balance at all times, okay? The kind of technical term for that is homeostasis. Because if you spiral too far into pleasure or you spiral too far into pain, neither one of those things is going to go very well. And so what happens is, and what he's trying to tell you that their plan was every time you get a hit of dopamine on that scale, it kind of gives you some weight on the pleasure side, your body and your brain responds by putting weight on the pain side. It responds to the pleasure with the pain. Ultimately, the way it does it is by reducing your brain's own capacity to produce dopamine. So you get the dopamine hit, and now I feel bad, but I need to feel better, but I can't produce it myself, so I gotta go back to that source again and get another hit because you can't produce it yourself anymore. And so what's wild is the way that guys like Sean Parker designed all this is that every click, every swipe ends up getting you things like this. And if you could describe the burnout society in 6 words, it would probably be this. You're like, I thought this was just parenting. I mean, yes, for sure. I thought this was just being a college student. Yeah, absolutely, it is, right? But these are normal to you, right? I mean, yes or no, this is normal life for you, for me. But do you know what this is actually a list of? This is actually a list of withdrawal symptoms. In other words, people experience cravings for a reason. That you experience fatigue for a reason. That I experience anxiety for a reason. Now, what's wild to me, you go on Instagram and every other video on Instagram is telling you that you have an anxiety problem. That's all Instagram is. It's just trying to tell you lately you have an anxiety problem. But for me, and I could get really worked up by this, the audacity of Instagram to tell you that you have an anxiety problem when really the problem might actually be Instagram. This is the definition of gaslighting. This is your abuser telling you that you've got the problem when really they're the ones giving you the problem. And you do like my neighbor did, recently told me she got off social media for a little bit, and all of a sudden you begin to feel a little bit better. These are withdrawal symptoms. I put in my notes, could it be that our society is living in a global state of digital withdrawal and doesn't even know it? That our global experiment in omnipresence comes with some side effects, some unattended side effects. I mean, anxiety is a symptom. It's your body trying to tell you that something's wrong. Like that used to be, that's common sense now, that used to be a controversial idea. Depression is a symptom, right? This was a groundbreaking psychological discovery. So people used to think that depression was a chemical imbalance in the brain. You know that? So that was the used to be the kind of standard thinking in psychology, that depression was a chemical imbalance in the brain. And then in 1978, along came a guy named George Brown who said, that doesn't feel right to me. And so he begins to do this research. And what George Brown discovers is that depression is not caused by a chemical imbalance in your brain. But depression is actually caused by traumatic events or a toxic lifestyle. And those traumatic events that you've experienced or that toxic lifestyle that you might not be able to feel like you can break free from, they do change your brain chemistry, but it's not the chemical imbalance in the brain that causes depression. It's actually traumatic events. It's actually toxic lifestyle. And I'll tell you, this is really good news because people used to think, okay, you deal with depression, so that means something's wrong with you. So I battle depression, that means something's wrong with you. And what George Brown is saying is, no, depression doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. Depression is your body's way of trying to tell you that something's not right in its environment, that something has gone wrong. There's something wrong in your environment. There's something wrong in our society. Well, what has gone wrong? Okay, fast forward, and then along more recently comes a guy named Johann Hari. And Johann Hari, through his research, has developed what he calls the 9 true causes of depression. You could call these really the social causes of depression. About 7 or 8 of them are social causes. And if I could sum up all of Johann Hari's work on this in about 2 or 3 words, it would be this: that depression equals disconnection. This is really important. And if you're taking notes today, please write that down. All of his research would say depression equals disconnection, that we have experienced disconnections in our life that, because we were never designed to experience that sort of disconnect, have created depression in us. And I brought the list. These are the disconnections he's talking about. We'll put them up here on the screen. Disconnection from meaningful work. Disconnection from other people. Disconnection from meaningful values. We put a star by this next one because it's really disconnection due to childhood trauma, caused by the childhood trauma that you experience, and now there's a disconnection you have in your life. Disconnection from status and respect, disconnection from the natural world, and then lastly, disconnection from what he calls a hopeful and a secure future. Now, there are a couple other things he acknowledges as well. One of them is genes. So he would say that 37% of all depression is hereditary, and not that you necessarily get it because your dad had it or your mom had it, but there is a gene that about 37% of people have that make you more likely to experience depression if you have a traumatic event or if you develop a toxic lifestyle, right? And the last one's called neuroplasticity, and you can nerd out on that all you want to, but neuroplasticity is how your brain changes largely because of your thoughts, and I would argue this is actually good because you can play a part in that, right? Philippians chapter 4 for more about how just thinking positively, thinking on godly thoughts can actually help you in your depression. But why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because we have a device that promises connection that may actually make us more disconnected than we've ever been, and actually gives us, or at least contributes to everything on the list. Can we put the list, actually, we go back one slide and put everything back up on the list, on the screen? Yeah. I mean, I don't have to tell you how it gets in the way of your work, right? A disconnection from other people. I saw recently that loneliness has the same effect on your body as a physical attack. It affects your body in the same way. Disconnection from meaningful values. Clay talked about that last week, right? Advertising and advertisements make you feel inadequate until you buy their product. Disconnection from childhood trauma. Right? I mean, many college students in the room could report to how screens have played a part in this. Did you know that the word Facebook appears in 66% of all divorce papers right now in America? 66%. That means that your child's childhood trauma might be in your pocket right now if you're not careful, if I'm not careful. Disconnection from status and respect. That never happens online, of course. Disconnection from the natural world. Our pharmaceutical companies would never tell you that, right? Because they can't sell that. Can't make money off that. But that's real. And then disconnection from hope, from a secure future. In a sense, to be disconnected from these things is to be disconnected from God, from the life that he designed you to live. And yet because of that dopamine cycle, and we get the hit, and now we feel bad, and now we can't seem to make it our own, we keep going back over and over and over again. And thus, we find articles like the one I found in The Atlantic entitled, "Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation?" And what I want to do is I want to read you just a little bit from this article and then wade back into some happier waters. But is everybody doing okay so far? Yeah, cool. Wow. Okay, so I got an email one time from a guy who said, "Hey, I was the guy that passed out in your message, and I just wanted to, you're preaching right to me." And I was like, "Sorry, thanks, you're welcome." I didn't know exactly what to say. So is everybody still tracking? Okay, good. All right, so the article talked about how teens today are in some ways safer than they've ever been because they don't go to the mall, okay? They don't go to parties. In fact, 12th graders today go out less than 8th graders did a decade ago. Think about that. They're far less likely to date, so sexual activity is down. The teen birth rate, in fact, just hit an all-time low. I mean, encouraging. Down 67% from the 90s, no judgment. They're working less. In fact, one of the kind of talked about parts of the hiring crisis in America is that we can't seem to get teenagers to want to go to work because they just want, it seems that they're on their phone all the time. You might would ascribe that to academic pressure, a lot of academic pressure. But all the research would say that they're not actually spending any more time studying than we did in the 80s or 90s or 2000s. They're way less likely to get into a car accident because they're less likely to drink, but they are not safer in general. In fact, this is what the article said. It said, quote, "You might expect that teens spend so much time in these new digital spaces because it makes them happy, but most data suggests that it does not. The results could not be clearer. Teens who spend more time than average on screen activities are more likely to be unhappy. And those who spend more time than average on non-screen activities are more likely to be happy. It says, quote, there's not a single exception. All screen activities are linked to less happiness, and all non-screen activities are linked to more happiness. The more time teens spend looking at screens, the more likely they are to report symptoms of depression. Since 2007, the year that the iPhone came out, the homicide rate amongst teens has declined, but the suicide rate amongst teens has increased. Last decade, for the first time in a long time, the rate of teen suicide surpassed the rate of teen homicide. And I put in my notes, why is it that the person teenagers hate the most is themselves? So the article concludes, if you were going to give advice for a happy adolescence based on this survey, it would be straightforward. Put down the phone, turn off the laptop, and do something, anything, that does not involve a screen. And I think we all know that. Like, I think as a society, we feel that. But I think the question is, can we? Like, is that realistic? I mean, how do you do that? And so in the spirit of thinking critically, in the spirit of trying to live well, in the spirit of trying to parent well, I want to take us to one verse in the scriptures, one verse in the New Testament that was not the verse that I originally intended on preaching about today, but it is the one that I felt led to bring. And this is 1 Corinthians 6, and this is what it says. It says, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. And Paul wrote this in the context of relationships and sexuality. So again, I'm not trying to take it to mean something it doesn't, but I really believe that you could apply this to any wisdom situation in your life. It could apply this to your money, could apply this to substances, and absolutely can apply this to technology. So let's dive into one more time. You can put it back on the screen one more time and just kind of dig into this real quick. He says, I have the right to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. What does that mean? He's saying, in other words, there are things that I could say yes to that would actually be better for me if I said no to them. Have you ever had that realization about something in your life? And then he says, I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. In other words, there are things in your life that you can say yes to, but if you say yes to them enough times, you will no longer be able to say no to them. And again, if you're like me, you're sitting here and you're like, well, this is cool, and I'm on my phone too much, but I wouldn't say I'm mastered by my phone. Well, if we're not mastered by our phones, then why do we hear a message like this and think, well, I don't really have a choice? If I'm not mastered by my phone, then why is it that most mornings for the last decade, the first thing I did when I woke up was just scroll? Maybe I actually am. Maybe Thoreau was right when he said, we have become the tools of our tools. And what the Apostle Paul is trying to tell us is, look, this is not about right or wrong. Like, we get caught up so much talking about what's right and what's wrong. And honestly, Christians love to do that. And if I sat here today and I can just kind of hammer on, this is right, this is wrong, you got to do this, it would sound way more spiritual than this talk actually sounds. This talk doesn't sound very spiritual so far. But I could talk right or wrong and it would sound more spiritual. But Paul's going, look, don't get caught up on what's right or wrong or eat all the things that you could do, right? Because look, there is no limits in the burnout society. We talk about that. You could do anything. Instead, this is a conversation about what's wise. This is about wisdom. Wisdom is like a 2.0 feature of Christianity, right? Right and wrong, 1.0. Wisdom is 2.0. And what the Apostle Paul has given us today is honestly a real gift. And I don't know, maybe technology is not your thing and you're fine. But if you find yourself in any sort of gray area, and man, honestly, in my opinion, we live in the world with all kinds of gray areas, right? There's so many things that there aren't verses about. Now, what do we do and how do we navigate it? Can we and can't we, or should we or shouldn't we? He has given us the most clear sort of template to evaluate gray area subjects. And it's those two thoughts, right? I mean, is it beneficial? And am I being mastered by it? Is it beneficial? And am I being mastered by it? Anytime you run into something that seems unclear to you and you're trying to figure out, should I stop? Am I too far, too much into this? Is it beneficial? Am I being mastered by it, right? We got to think critically. Now, I love what Neil Postman said about that in terms of technology. This is from a book he wrote called Technopoly. And he said, quote, technology must never be accepted as the natural order of things. Every technology, from an IQ test to an automobile to a television set to a computer, is a product of a particular economic and political context. It means there might be some money or some power involved, and carries with it a program, an agenda, and a philosophy that may or may not be life-enhancing, may or may not be the same philosophy that you even have, and that therefore requires scrutiny, criticism, and control. In other words, walking carefully. And so 2 questions, and then we're done. It's like so simple. And the first question is this: regarding your current relationship with your phone, with social media maybe. The first question is this: is it beneficial for you right now? You have the right to do anything, right? We're not actually going to monitor your screen time. That's not what we're about, right? You have the right to do anything, but is it beneficial for you? One of the questions I asked you in week 1 of this whole series was, what do you want? Like, what do you want out of life? So I would say, is your current relationship with your phone actually leading you to what you want, to be able to accomplish the things that you want, to have the family that you want, to be able to have the kind of kids that you want, to be able to have the relationships that you want? One of the books I read in research for this is this book, Digital Minimalism, Cal Newport, secular book, but honestly pretty good. And one of his advice in the book was you need to develop a vision for your life and for your family, and then add technology back in to support that vision. Don't just adopt all the technologies of the world and every new invention and just assume that it's a good thing. No, you need to start with your vision for your life, or maybe in our case, God's vision for our life and our families and the things that we have been entrusted to steward. Start there, add technology back in, and then I love what he says. And then you have to be comfortable missing out on everything else. #NoMo. I think he's been listening to the series. He's been tracking, been watching along from New York or whatever. So if your current relationship with technology does not have the boundaries that you want it to, or is not working for you, what could you do? What do you need to change? What's a plan you could put in place? I'm really excited about this. On the way out today, we're going to give you this worksheet, Burnout Prevention Plan. And it's kind of got different subjects for all the things we've been talking about in this series and we'll continue to talk about. But on this plan, you can fill this out, by yourself, you and your roommates, you and your spouse, you and your kids, whatever. Put it on your phone and begin to sort of think about, all right, in terms of my time, my rest, my Sabbath that Stephen talked about, in terms of technology, what's a plan we can put into place? What's something we need to try? What's something we want to agree to as some family rules or agree to experiment with? But I'll tell you, the one that I always recommend and the one that I honestly ascribe to personally is from this book right here called The Tech-Wise Family. And if you have kids or you have grandkids, this would be an amazing small group discussion. Spend a month or whatever, or 6 weeks or 2 weeks, talking through this book, The Tech-Wise Family. But in this book, Andy Crouch says you need to pause from your phone 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and 1 week a year. I'll say that again, 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, pause from your phone, and 1 week a year. And like a vacation, family vacation or something. And I'll tell you, for me, the 1 day a week was the one that always seemed impossible until I started doing it. Like for me now, almost every Saturday is a phone-free Saturday. Like didn't look at my phone one time yesterday, not until I woke up this morning. And I'll tell you, it's amazing. It's amazing. In my opinion, a phone-free day gets a lot longer in a good way because you're gaining so much time back into your life to fill it with good things. And so that could be one plan you could adopt. Say, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that for a week. You will love it if you do that. But look, here's why I think you should try it and why I think you would love it. The problem is not that you have access to the internet all the time. That's not going to change. We can't change that. We don't want to change that, right? The problem is not that you have access to the internet all the time. The problem is that it has access to you all the time. Right? So how do you build in time to just be free, to get away, to not be kind of on all the time? Some of you work in social media, and boy, I wonder what you've been thinking the last 20 minutes. I wanted to tell you, you are not the bad guy here. You're not the bad guy. I really believe that if you have a platform, God has given you that platform to reach people, to help people who are hurting with a lot of things we've been talking about today. So you don't need to shut that down. That I think would be foolish for you to do that. But you know more than anyone how easy it is to get controlled by all this and how easy it is to get sucked into all of this, right? Because for you, the more time that you spend is the more time that you work is the more money you make. And so I would encourage you to think through as well. How is it beneficial for you? Is your current system, is your current plan, is your current working hours beneficial, right? You need to find a way that your work life doesn't somehow envelop and take over your whole life. And not only that, like, could you be like Chick-fil-A and take a day off? I mean, it seems to be hurting them, I'm sure, in their bottom line. But is there a way to break free from that so that you don't have to, feel the pressure to always just be your brand? And you can actually pause for an hour a day, or a day a week, or a week a year, and to just be you and not have to be your brand. Your plan could involve something you do with your phones. My friend Seth owns a coffee shop here called Hendershots. I was walking past the other day, and apparently they're doing this thing on Tuesday night called phone-free parties. The kind of subtitle was real life in real time, right? So maybe you and your friends need to have some sort of phone-free parties or phone-free dinners. Now, this raises, an existential question, which is, if you experience something and you don't post about it, did it actually happen? I don't know. None of us have ever tried that. So that you could try it and report back to us and let us know if that's real. Now, again, in-person interaction, that's a whole thing. Post-COVID, that's hard. We now live in a world where we know exactly what emoji to respond with at all times. But in-person interaction gets us like Ricky Bobby, and we don't know what to do with our hands. It's just it's awful to think about like talking to humans face to face, and I'm being halfway serious on that. And so maybe it's a friend thing. Parents, we have to make sure we are keeping our kids safe in the screens world. But not only that, we have to make sure that our kids know that they are more important to us than whatever's on the other side of our phones. And I will tell you, just in a moment of kind of transparency, there have been moments where my kids, and this is terrible, there have been moments that my kids felt like distractions to me from whatever I was doing on my phone. And it wasn't until I paused from that phone, did things like a phone-free Saturday, that I realized, oh my gosh, my phone was beginning to cost me something that I didn't want to give up. And so we got to make sure that our kids know kind of where they fall in relation to our phone as well. So number one, is it beneficial for you? And the last thing in the word, number two, are you being mastered by it? And here's what I've learned. Phones are medicators. They are digital drugs. We use them to mask painful feelings in our life. And I learned this at a place called Onsite, a bit of a retreat place I got to go to last summer, really cool. And one of the reasons why I picked it was because I knew it was gonna be a week without my phone altogether. And as soon as I get there, you turn in your phone, you go back to your cabin, and you're like, I am so stupid. Why did I do? I should have given them a burner phone, or I should have snuck an iPad in here. Like the Braves are on a winning streak, and I have no idea what's happening. And I'm just like, and family too, of course, obviously. But I was just so like, honestly, it was like, I hated it for the first couple of days. But then around day 3, I realized that we started talking about these medicators and things that we go to. And I realized, I remember writing it in this journal. I was like, maybe it's like part of being 37, but I was like, I think my phone is my number one medicator that I go to. And this is part of some of the workbook. This is free. I don't even know if I'm allowed to share this, but I'm going to. This is what it said in the workbook they gave us. It said, a medicator is anything we reach for in order to turn up a feeling we want more of, or turn down a feeling we want less of. Medicators are not to be confused with helpful or needed medication. No. Instead, medicators are things we turn to when we're feeling disturbed, distressed, or otherwise are in need of a distraction. I love this. Medicators are an external solution. It's something we can do for an internal unmet need. They said, we all use some kind of medicine to alleviate the pain and stressors of our lives. And as with all medicine, misuse and abuse are going to have side effects. And this was one of the side effects they taught us. That not all medicators become addictions, but all addictions start as medicators. That the things that we turn to help us sometimes grab a hold of us in ways that we never intended to. And I'll tell you what, this is why I don't judge one person in this room who battles addiction, who ever has. This is why, honestly, I hope our church, and I believe our church is like the most friendly church in the whole city for anyone battling addiction, because you know exactly where this thing. You know that you didn't start down that path on purpose. You know that you were dealing with something internal. You were dealing with one of those disconnections we talked about. And the thing that you reached for to help you, the thing that you thought you could trust, the thing that other people told you might work for you, in the end didn't actually work for you. And here's what I've been, increasingly convinced of, even as it relates to this, is that anytime you turn a tool into a god, it becomes an idol. And that's bad for lots of reasons, but ultimately, maybe the biggest problem is that idols can't actually heal you. I believe, as far as medicating things goes, that what we're medicating are actually those very same disconnections that we talked about earlier. Can we throw those back up there one more time? Yeah. I'm convinced that if you are here today and you are struggling with depression or struggling with anxiety, but certainly with depression, that you can almost certainly spot your disconnection on this list. Something that you're struggling with right now, a disconnection that happened to you when you were much younger, maybe multiple, maybe you have multiple of them. And what I want to tell you is that no medicator you could possibly come up with can repair that disconnection. Not alcohol, not pornography, and not our phones, right? Can they mask it? Sure. Can they numb the pain? Absolutely. Can they heal it? No. But there is one person who can. Jesus Christ, who was broken on the cross to repair every disconnection in your life and forgive you for any part you played in or any part that you played in somebody else's. The scripture says it's by his wounds that we are healed. And so we're going to close with a song. And maybe we can just all go ahead and just stand up. Can we just stand together for this song? I want to pray for you. But I don't know what your relationship with God is. I don't know what your relationship with Christ is like. Maybe it's been a long time. Maybe you're back today because it's your first sort of attempt in a long time to get reconnected with him. But I want to tell you, he is the only one who can fix this repair. If you don't know him, if you don't have a relationship with him, today's the day to do that. Today's the day to put your trust in him. If you are here today and you've tried to run to some of these other things, this song can be a moment for you to just even, as you pray, as we sing, just tell God, I don't want to try to chase down these things on my own. I don't want to have to go through this on my own. I believe that you're with me. I receive your love. And so, as always, you're welcome to respond however you want. You can stand and sing, you can sit and pray, you can come down front here and pray. You can do whatever you need to do, but I want to pray for you. And then I'm going to ask and pray that the love of God would land on this place and heal in a way that only he can. So let's pray together. God, I just confess to you all the times that I have run to so many other things to try to repair the pain in my life. And I think it's because I'm a fixer, or think it's because this is right there. I can do this, I could try this. And I just confess to you and repent of all the times that I haven't gone to you instead. So this moment right here is our chance to go to you instead, to tell you how much we need you and to be reminded of how much you love us and how you've been here the whole time. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.